look at in their understanding, the individual is not free, and okay, we got disconnected again. Okay, right. We are back again. So that's where they would understand that this freedom would not be available to a person who belongs to the class of have-nots. But again, in Emin Ra's understanding, this also has to do with the system of party politics in liberal democracies. So in his understanding, the parties, they would behave in a manner where actually they would serve the interest of this small group of people who own the means of production. So that is how, in his understanding, the state, or the liberal democratic state rather, would not function in the general interest, and that is how he would relate to it. He would relate it to the aspect of individual freedom, right? But I understand that there may be kind of critique to this understanding of class relations and this understanding of individual freedom. But I think we should wait till we have finished our discussions on Emin Ra's understanding of freedom and how he looks at freedom, and how freedom has to be understood with respect to individual and in terms of individual's relationship with his environment, right? So that's where please keep the point in mind that in Emin Ra's understanding, matter still matters, right? So there is an important role for matter as far as the evolution of human history is concerned, and as far as understanding of human freedom is concerned. And there you would factor in the role of science, right? So that is something which would be which would be interesting for us to look at, right? But as far as the individuals loss of freedom in a capitalist society or in a liberal democratic state is concerned, this is how Emin Ra would try to look at. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Excuse me, sir.
Huh.
So how did Emin Ra try to critique on the Marxian philosophy? I couldn't get the whole idea.
Achha, okay.
Please explain it.
Okay. See, there are two things that Emin Ra does, right? As I told you, one, he prescribes his own method that how the evolution of human history can be explained in terms of causation, meaning that there are certain factors which lead to certain changes. So can we say that only economic relations of production is the cause and which leads to changes in the society, right? Which leads to the progress of human society from one stage to another. So that's where if I may add that how Marxism understands this progress. So in Marxism, again I would not go into the details of Marxist philosophy, but as far as Marxism is concerned, Marxism understands that there are economic relations of production, which is an outcome of economic forces of production at a given point of time. and they both together make what Marxism calls as mode of production, right? So your means of production or forces of production along with your relations of production makes your mode of production. And this is what would bring about changes in the superstructure, what we see in the form of the state, what we see in the form of society, what we see in the form of ideology, right? Religion, ideas, all these things are part of only superstructure. But what actually brings about changes is the economic forces of production, right? So once means of production undergoes change, then so the corresponding relations of production, they too would undergo change. And once they change, then the very base on which this superstructure that is erected, that is to be understood, as I told you, as a state or as society or as religion or ideology, they would also undergo change. But superstructure is seen only in just one role, that they would function to justify the existing relations of production, which happens to be of exploitative nature in every stage of human history during the course of its progress. Right? Is it clear? So this is how Marxism would look at changes. So what actually becomes that in Emile Roy's understanding, this is a deterministic interpretation of history, wherein everything is reduced to economic forces of production. Right? Every change is to be seen only in terms of its relationship with the economic relations of production. So this is where he understands that one, it is deterministic, and second, it assumes that the successive stages would occur or would evolve in a manner what Marx had prescribed. Right? So that is where it becomes kind of idealistic as well. So one, it is deterministic, and another, it is idealistic. Idealistic also because Marx had predicted that eventually the destruction of capitalism would result in a stateless and classless society, which is to be known as a communist society. But as I discussed in Emile Roy's understanding, history had not given evidence to this effect. And the experience had shown to the world that there would not be any classless or stateless society. And the Soviet Union or the Soviet state was a glaring example of this fact. Right? So that is where he understands that one, this interpretation is not correct. This requires some kind of different explanation, because this is not simply empirical, or this is not to be seen in terms of its causes, but somewhere it also has to be seen in a logical manner, right? How logically it would be correct to look at the evolution of human history. And therein he would emphasize the role of ideas, and he would attach the importance of influence of ideas on the evolution of human history, which I would see as a kind of influence of Hegel on Emile Roy, right? So this is how he would look at, and he would see that in the whole process, the human agency, human beings, an individual, has been reduced to a stage where he passively becomes part of the change rather than an active agent who can bring about any change. So that is again another issue in Emile Roy's understanding with Marxism, right? So that's how he would provide a critique to Marxism, and that is where he would also suggest that a few things are to be factored in order to provide a complete explanation of evolution of human history, and that is where human history is to be understood in terms of integral evolution, and this integral evolution has to factor in the social, mental, and intellectual aspect, rather than simply look at the economic aspects, which Marxism does in his understanding, right? So role of ideas, they become important, human agency, that becomes important, and as far as the whole conception of history is concerned, it is not simply the economic forces and economic relations of production, but as I told you, the way one can look at evolution in social, mental, and intellectual field of human evolution in an integral manner. So that's how we look at it. Yeah.
So what kind of ideas was M.N. Roy referring to when he pointed to Hegel? In what sense he wanted to construe the meaning of ideas?
No, ideas. See, it's not about what kind of idea, right? It's understanding. It's about understanding the role of idea itself. Right now, M.N. Roy is not clear that whether as far as idea is concerned, whether ideas may be good or bad, how ideas related to reasoning, right? So that is where his understanding is linked to his understanding of human nature, which in his in his understanding is rational as well as moral, both. And this is what would be linked to his understanding of human freedom that you would discuss. We would discuss later, right? But at present, what we can understand that in M.N. Roy's understanding, ideas too are important, and ideas are not simply determined by the existing economic conditions, but they too have an autonomous status. So when we say changes and when we see that the previous structures, they were done away with and they had been destructed, and in its place new structures have come up. So it is not simply due to the changes in the economic field, but also due to the influence of ideas which might have been exercised by the new emerging class, for instance, or the existing class relations, for instance, right? So it is not simply a one-way progression, but it's kind of interaction that would be important in terms of understanding the evolution. This is what he would do that. So ideas may be related to any field, but especially his emphasis would be ideas which may be related to scientific or technological changes, which may be instrumental in terms of bringing about changes in the very base itself, right? In the very economic relations of production itself, right? So that's how one can say. But as I told you, ideas are not simply to be taken to be confined to one specific field, because ideas could be related to anything, the way they emerge, right? So under maybe one can take an example. For instance, the whole changes one possibly looks at in Germany, right? In Germany, that happens under Nazi